Real Country 1430 AM and 1073 FM WRDN. This is the WRDN Morning Farm Report. I'm Brian Winnekins. Joining us this morning, our alfalfa expert, Randy Welch with Forage Genetics. We're going to talk about alfalfa for the spring, and boy, it's kind of interesting. Thank you to our newsmaker sponsors, including Alcivia Co-op, Anabasilo Animal Wellness Center, Compeer Financial, Osteoplastics, Synergy Co-op, Wisconsin Farmers Union, Wisconsin Corn Growers Association, and Wisconsin Soybean Marketing Board. And Randy, thanks for joining us. Well, on Monday, I was at the Kohler Farm. They're the host of the Pepin County Dairy Breakfast for this coming June Dairy Month. Randy took me out to his alfalfa field, and when we were walking out there, it looked like dandelions, but it wasn't dandelions. Alfalfa weevil everywhere. And Randy tells me that this is something that's happening really in Wisconsin, Minnesota, and even Illinois. What have you been seeing?
Yeah, they're basically an insect pest that develops with the heat units going north. So we started with alfalfa weevil probably 3 weeks ago at the Kansas City area, then moving north, through the plains and up through Iowa, Missouri, Iowa, and then now finally here in Wisconsin. So they are a heat unit driven insect. So once we get to about 400, 450 heat units, they maximize their activity in egg laying, and then the worms come out, or the little weevils come out and start feeding on the alfalfa. So basically what they're doing right now is eating the leaves, the material between the veins of the leaves. They cause a process called skeletonization, and that skeletonization leaves the vein material and the stem material, of course, and the little weevil basically weave in and out, if you will, of the veins, and they leave kind of when you look at the field from quickly from the field margin, it looks like it's almost frosted, because all you see is these the veins that are left. So, but they are very destructive. They go through about 4 or 5 instars, and so by that I mean that they grow from itty bitty, just barely see them kind of worms, to fairly substantial. And when they get up to that second, third, and fourth instar, they consume a lot of alfalfa very quickly. So you can have an alfalfa field that looked pretty good on Monday or Tuesday, and by Wednesday, Thursday, it's being substantially consumed. So very, very, very damaging insect that we need to be very aware of in west central Wisconsin.
And Randy, from what I understand, okay, let's say I know I might have this issue developing, so I harvest it. But if I don't do something to the harvested alfalfa, the weevils just keep feeding on it?
Well, it's a little more complicated. What happens is if you catch them kind of at the mid stage, in the third instar, that mid instar size, we generally tend to kill them in the harvesting process. So that's they're either if you're using a crusher type machine, that they are killed in the crushing operation. In the other hand, where we're just dropping the alfalfa, some of the weevils will fall off if they will fall off and start on second crop. And so that's the calls I've been getting this morning, have been situations where the cutters or the mergers have basically knocked the weevils off from the existing alfalfa that was cut, and then are falling onto the ground. And they're very heavily concentrated in the windrow areas. So our advice to growers is if you're in second crop regrowth right now, or you cut alfalfa a week ago and you had some weevil in there, make sure that you're checking the areas directly below the windrows where your cutters went or your mergers went. That's where you'll find substantial damage. And so they can be a problem in second crop. Just depends how far they were along in their egg laying, hatching process, and it's all a matter of timing. Cool weather like we're having right now will tend to slow them down. And hot weather, we get days back into the mid 80s, they will move very quickly as far as their development. And then these temperatures in the 60s tend to slow them down. So I'm anticipating we'll get a fairly long egg laying period. So we need to watch our second crop alfalfa very, very carefully from here on out. And the calls that I've gotten, at least from southern Wisconsin, are they're feeding on second crop. So we're cutting first crop as quickly as we can with the rains. It's going to be a challenge for a lot of growers with the fields being so wet. But check your second crop regrowth very carefully here with alfalfa weevil.
Talking with Randy Welch with Forage Genetics. Randy, so you mentioned, okay, get that first crop off, check if you see that, okay, they're in those windrows, then we should be getting some type of insecticide out there or something out there to take care of the weevils, or is there nothing really we can do?
Yeah. So insecticides would be the course of action would be to spray the field with an insecticide. So Our choices are a little bit limited. We have several products on the market from various vendors here with the Winfield, Cropland, Forage Genetics Group. We'd have a group of insecticides that would be available, and those are basically quite effective. They're not. We did lose Lorsban legally. We did have a reinstatement of Lorsban, I guess, for one more year through the EPA, but we do have some Lorsban that's available, and that would be a product that we'd highly recommend for weevil control. And then there are other products available, but we would be spraying them to control those larval insects. The most difficult part is controlling the adults. The adults we really don't control very well. They basically go into once they get into their once the weevils immatures become what we call pupate, then they basically go into suspended animation and don't cause really any problems for us the rest of the year until next spring when they mate again and the little worms come out and do the damage in first crop. So they're basically a now you see it, now you don't type insect that generally affect our first crop and then affect our second crop. But we can spray. Second crop is really important. We spray second crop regrowth. And then on first crop, we generally recommend, in Wisconsin at least, that we can cut when you start seeing the weevil feeding. The threshold is about 30 to 40% of the plants. If you're showing, in the case that you described, is much higher than that. But if you are seeing 30 to 40% of the plants showing pinhole feeding, not defoliation, but pinhole feeding, we'd recommend cutting that first crop. And we should be at that stage right now anyway here in Wisconsin, be cutting alfalfa. And then on the regrowth, we always want to make sure we're scouting very carefully. Look for feeding on those crowns and the new shoots that are coming up on your second crop, and then make a spray application of an insecticide to clean those up for your second crop regrowth.
Other than the potential damage for second crop, can these weevils in first and second crop harm the plant, that alfalfa plant, so that third and potentially fourth crop are damaged, or that the plant itself can't recover? Is that possible or not?
Yeah, absolutely. And so in second crop regrowth, we're very concerned about that, is that if the damage is severe and too consuming of that plant tissue, you got to remember that plant has basically been defoliated, and now its growth cycle is in kind of a stage of consumption where that plant, until it's about 3 to maybe 6 inches tall, it's consuming energy that was really accumulated in the very tail end of the first crop growth. And so if the weevil are feeding on second crop growth as fast as that shoot is generated from the crown and consumed, that means that there's no energy going back into their crown, and that energy is being consumed by the weevil. And the answer is yes, that will certainly can, if it's bad enough, if you have enough worms on each of those plants, you can kill second crop regrowth. And so in years of, I think maybe the other discussion point here needs to be in years of really dry falls like we had last year. It seems that the spring or the year following a really dry summer is the year where we have more weevil problems. And that would make sense, is that when you typically look at the Kansas, Oklahoma, and Nebraska alfalfa growing regions, we have weevil there almost every year. Certainly very similar to what we have here in Wisconsin right now. So dry summers in our experience has kind of taught us that you're probably going to have weevil, and we kind of anticipated this with a lot of our growers and recommended that they be watching very carefully on regrowth, because it is quite an issue for a lot of producers. So yes, they can kill alfalfa.
Finally, Randy, with this weevil issue, obviously, if the plant tissue is gone, the feed value for that dairy cow is kind of gone too, isn't it?
Well, yeah, the rule of thumb is alfalfa leaves are 400 in relative feed value, stems are 60. So it doesn't take long to do the math on that to figure out that if you're losing half of your leaf matter or more, that you've lost substantial value to that alfalfa. Substantial milk production is lost. So, and couple that with the fact that we had a really rainy stretch of weather right when we were trying to get ready to harvest our alfalfa, that defoliated the alfalfa, and the lower third of the alfalfa plant may have lost leaves. And now with weevil chewing off the top part of the plant, forage qualities are going to hurt in our first crop this year. And it's really unfortunate, the situation that's kind of developed here in the last 10 days or so has been kind of critical of hurting forage quality. So yeah, we're probably losing, it's going to be a substantial loss in forage quality if the weevils are not controlled.
Finally, Randy, before we let you go, if producers have other questions, they can just reach out to their Forage Genetics dealer and they can forward that question on to you.
Well, yeah, they can reach me through you mentioned Alcivia Co-op would be one way that they can reach me. Through the Alcivia team would be the best way to reach me. So that'd be excellent.
All right, Randy Welch with Forage Genetics. This is the WRDN Morning Farm Report.